What is up, fellow sickos? I am Dan Favalli, joined as always by Mr. Grant Hughes. Another very special podcast for you. Super duper incredible collaboration with Bleacher Report's Joey Akeley, Jay Dunbar, and Bryan Toporek. They are back. You've now seen them on the channel by this point multiple times, I believe. Their Twitter links, their links to their Twitter accounts, will be in the podcast and YouTube description. We're doing a 5-year draft or redraft today. Basically, the top 30 players, anyone that was eligible for a draft class. They could have been undrafted, but since 2019, there are more extensive rules and thoughts and approaches that went into this. We are coming you from the past. Grant and I actually have not done this yet. The five of us have not gone through this. So we're going to bring Joey, Jay, and Bryan up on stage in just a minute. But Grant, anything else before we kind of just baptize ourselves by fire as we get every single pick right? The goal is to pick the top 30 players of the last 5 years that were drafted, and I'm excited to have 100% hit rate.
I'm excited for this to be not remotely controversial, for everyone to agree that all the picks are correct and in the proper order. And I'm just happy to be here for what we've already set up will be a draft without flaws. So, that'll be fun.
It is good to see all four of your faces again. Very excited to get into this. But before we get into the nitty gritty of, as Grant already said, getting every single pick right, Jay, are you able to just take us through this process and what we're actually attempting to do here and how it'll work and all that good stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. So we here, us at BR, we love redrafting things, especially during the off season. We're just kind of fiending for some hoops. So we decided to do a 5-year redraft. We're actually using the 2019 to 2023 classes, mostly because, this year's group hasn't played a minute in an actual game yet. But also 2019 is just a more interesting class than this year because, let's face it, this isn't that exciting of a group. But so as far as the actual rules that we're doing a full first round redraft. We're using the winning percentage of the last 5 seasons, so we can kind of get a good, gauge of where the team should fall without, copying last year's order. And, the picks will be based on best player available generally, although we will consider team needs in certain cases. And we're not going to consider salary because that would kind of unfairly, skew things away from 2019, 2020 classes who are getting a little bit more expensive. So, but I think I covered everything. Somebody can correct me if I missed anything, but that's the general gist of it.
And we're going to possibly collaborate on certain picks where there might be too divisive, or if they're not no-brainers as well. I'll take turns, but we're not actually building individual teams.
Yeah. Correct. Yeah, we have each of us are in charge of all 30 teams. So one person will, in the end, make the call, but this is more collaborative this time, and we're going to kind of try to arrive at the right pick.
Well, we have the teams. Everyone's technically going to have the final say and up on screen, so you could yell at each person based off how mad you are at that. We just wanted to make that easy on everybody. This was once again rigged by the person who did a bunch of the spreadsheet work, and Bryan has the first pick. So are we all ready to get started? Is anyone else? Are we nervous? Any thoughts, comments, concerns before we take off?
I was going to say, I wasn't clear there was the safety net of a collaborative discussion on each pick, so I feel way better about this whole thing now. So if it's a bad pick, it's on all of us. It's not just going to be me.
That's right.
So, Bryan, are you ready to start us off? You have the first pick somehow. You're the one who ran the order and somehow wound up with the first pick, so I call shenanigans there a little bit, but whatever.
That is right. Joey, Jay, and I met yesterday to just hammer out the ground rules, and I shared my screen. They can both vouch for this. Ran the randomizer, and this is the order it came out with. So, with the number 1 overall pick, the Detroit Pistons are going to select Victor Wembanyama, and I'm guessing there will not be much debate about this one. I mean, Anthony Edwards would be the only other guy I would even remotely consider here, but I think Wemby, frankly, has best player in NBA history within his realistic range of outcomes. And with all due respect to Ant-Man and anyone else from these other draft classes, I don't think that's the case. So Wemby is going to give me a top 10 defense right away. And, as the general manager of Detroit, I am fully anticipating losing Cade Cunningham at some point in this draft, but I will happily make the trade of Cade Cunningham for Victor Wembanyama.
So we're not concerned with Jalen Duren's future, I guess. They're just not super worried
Who's to
about
say
how.
Jalen Duren won't get poached during
Well,
this
that's
draft,
true.
right?
Well, I think maybe I just tipped my hand a little bit.
No,
I'm worried about Marcus Sasser. How does he fit with
Yeah.
Wemby? Are they gonna be okay?
Right. I think, frankly, Detroit loves nothing more than accumulating too many big men. So this actually feels like it's right. Troy, I am out now just being Troy Weaver.
Yeah.
There's like kind of a poetic tragedy to the Spurs being the second team up and watching Wemby go first. So, Bryan already kind of spoiled who I'm picking for number 2 with the Spurs. Anthony Edwards. I don't love framing things this way, but he might be the best two-way player in the game right now. Where you're talking about the highest ceiling on both offense and defense. I don't even know who else is in that conversation. Wemby, of course, as time goes on, the offense has to develop a little bit. Probably Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, not eligible for this draft, obviously, but just I don't know who the other candidates are that you would want to throw out in that situation. But yeah, I think this was also kind of an easy pick. Like the first two felt like they were going to be no-brainers, and we'll get into some debates thereafter. But put him on San Antonio. There's no longer Wemby there, but that's fine. You have another top-tier perimeter defender. Devin Vassell was eligible for this draft, so we might lose him, but he fits with Anthony Edwards perfectly. Chris Paul will set up Anthony Edwards. That'll be a nice little dynamic and fun, but I thought this was an easy decision.
Yeah, no notes, right? Like there's just you could really contort and try to think of a couple other guys, but I think I would say Edwards had no shot at being number 1, but I think it's like even harder to imagine him being number 3, if that makes sense. Like this just is the correct spot for him. Do
you really think he doesn't have a case just of like, well, what is are we sure that Wemby's going to hit his 99th percentile outcome on offense? And that with that, I wouldn't have, to be clear, I would have picked Wemby. But sure. Is there an argument that look what Anthony Edwards has done over a longer period of time? Is there a chance Wemby is ever as valuable as Ant Edwards is on offense?
Isn't the only way you get there to go even like zoom out even more and just say, well, the injury risk is there for Wemby and Ant has been super healthy and just his floor is like, I don't know, 2 years ago, he's just not going to be back down to that level. Maybe, for another 10. Wemby, it's like, well, you got to rely on the whole, we've never seen anything like this. So we don't know how to project the health stuff or whatever, but that's all just such, transparent. I
was just curious. I wouldn't have made the case. I was curious if anybody could.
I did my best. I don't have a good case.
But I do have a pick number 3. It's Grant.
It's me.
I'll just keep J-Dub is off the board. Do you guys want to move to pick number 4? Or?
Even for me, it's a little early. I don't know. I'll be surprised if there's a ton of controversy here, but I think it needs to be Tyrese Halliburton. I see some nodding, but I'm open to arguments. I just think I wasn't going to look too hard at team needs, but if we're talking Wizards and they're just like Tyus Jones remains unsigned, so even that wouldn't be an overwhelming. We have our cornerstone, which also the Wizards don't have. So to get Halliburton, who I think is probably the 3rd best player here anyway, at a position of pretty grave need for Washington, just like kind of checks all the boxes for me. But is there anybody else that we need to think about for this spot, or is it just Halliburton?
I had him 3rd on my board. I mean, I think there might be a run on point guards here pretty soon, and I think it's probably pretty obvious which point guards we're talking about. But I think Hallie, especially coming off a run to the conference finals, and for all the reasons you said, the Wizards have needed a point guard since prime John Wall, and you're not going to get much better than a guy who's a legitimate candidate to lead the NBA in assists probably each of the next 10 years if he wants to be.
Mm-hmm.
I think also that because of the hamstring injury, some people have just forgotten that he was in like the top 3 of the MVP discussion before that hamstring injury. And so when and then he comes back, he's not the same. They turn over the roster a little bit. You bring in Siakam. You lost Buddy Hield at the trade deadline. They were playing him off the ball more. I think this is not that anyone thought he was terrible after that, but if you're looking at other names here that are about to come, it's like Tyrese Halliburton might have been one of the 5 most valuable players in the NBA for basically half the season. And had he not gotten injured, maybe he would have finished with that same status, which is just, okay, it's one season. That doesn't happen by accident.
Yeah, absolutely. And he was third on my board as well. And even even after the injury, he was still scary in the playoffs. And the fact that he got injured against the Celtics, maybe saved their bacon. They really pushed them, and they deserve their flowers. The Pacers do after that series. I mean, that was, and Hallie was he was scary in that series, even though that was post injury. So agreed with everybody there. I think he's maybe not as clear of a number 3 as the other 2 picks were, but definitely comfortable with him at number 3. So I am next for what team do we have? We have
the Rockets.
Right? Rockets. Okay. Well, sorry, Philly fans, but I think I'm taking Maxey for this one. Bryan was right. I think it's between maybe him and Ja, and just given Ja's off-court stuff, I'm probably not putting the future of my franchise in his hands, at least if I have the choice not to. And Maxey, who knows what his ceiling is? I mean, he just keeps proving people wrong, and I think he's a clear number 4 from me, but I don't know if there's any pushback against that.
This is a hard one for me. I had Morant 4 on my board, but I totally take your point. Like, it's such a risk reward thing. Like, I guess the argument I would make for Morant, and there's probably 2 or 3 other guys we could probably bring up, is that he's probably had 2 seasons at least as good as Maxey was last year. In terms of scoring average and like really team success too. He was the best player on Grizzlies teams that won 50 plus 2 years in a row. But yeah, the downside risk is just like, it's so significant. And if the argument is like Maxey at his best is pretty close, Maxey at his worst, I would argue, is nowhere near as bad as Ja at his worst in terms of like trying to build a functional franchise. So I get it. I can't push back too hard. Although we have 2 Tyreses in a row. How do we feel about that?
Is like, and also with Ja, Grant kind of alluded to this, but one, there's like, in addition to the off-court stuff, there's just all the injuries, and then it's easier to fit Tyrese Maxey into a larger like offensive ecosystem than Ja Morant, right? Where you kind of have to build it around Ja Morant, and he's good enough to do so. You could build it around Maxey, or you could make Maxey kind of not an accessory, but like a number 2 or number 3 option if you need to. And I don't think Ja is wired, like his skill's not wired that way. And I also wonder, even if you like Ja's skill set in a vacuum better, and I think he's the better passer and there's more directionality to his game, how long does his prime last when we know about these like hyper athletic point guards? Like Maxey's speed may kind of wane as time goes on, but he also has these other counters in different directions. So I honestly, even if you threw the off-court stuff and injury stuff out of the equation, do we think the gap between these two is even that large?
I would just say the only like the counter to the counter to the counter is I can imagine a scenario where Ja Morant is the best player on a team, clearly, that makes like a conference finals or even a finals. I don't know if I see that with Maxey, but maybe that's unfair just because of who he already plays with, where like he's just not going to have that label. Does that, you know what I mean? Like Morant is such a singular star that you do have to build around, which is like a positive and a negative, as you explained. But I don't see that. I don't know. Bryan needs to weigh in.
Yeah, what the hell?
Is that a fair assessment of like the Maxey Morant comparison?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, I think Maxey, to Dan's point, if you're imagining the hypothetical fit in Houston with like Red Van Vliet, both guys can frankly play on or off the ball, and we saw there will be some size issues defensively in the backcourt there, but we saw Maxey with Kyle Lowry this past season after the trade deadline and after he got bought out. Like that dual point guard pairing actually worked really well and helped unlock some versatility in Maxey that he wasn't able to show in the first half of the year. So, I mean, I obviously a little biased here. I did have Maxey 4th and Grant 5th on my board. Like I do think it is close. But Houston, I think in this exercise in particular, it's also tough because you have to assume they're going to lose at least Şengün and Jalen Green, probably Jabari Smith as well. So like there is a major drop off of young talent there. They'll still have potentially guys like Tari Eason, Reed Shepard, even Amin Thompson. So, figuring out the fit in the aftermath of this exercise would be really interesting, but I think they'll have enough chips in play to still be able to, they could flip Fred VanVleet and some of their picks for someone else who fits better with Maxey. So yeah, I like the pick, Jay.
Even if you don't agree, the fact that Maxey's in the discussion just reiterates getting him at number 21 might be the best value of this, the path between 2019 and 2023. Just because Wemby, okay, greatest of all time, but with the number 1 pick, you kind of expect that outcome. Number 21, Tyrese Maxey was such a fucking steal.
Yeah.
I don't think it's an exaggeration to say it saved the Joel Embiid era in Philly. I think he would have requested a trade by now if they did not get Tyrese Maxey in that spot.
All right, Joey, Are you ready to give us pick number 5?
I am, but hold on. I'm getting a call here from Joe Lacob. Hey, wow. Hey, Mr. Lacob, how are you? What do you think about this pick? You want to take James Wiseman? You still believe? Wow. I think I'm not gonna take that advice. Sorry, Joe. I'm gonna take John Morant over James Wiseman. Just letting you know. So I think you guys already made the argument for me. This isn't very difficult, but it's really a shame that Joe Lacob doesn't agree. But yeah, they're going to lose LaMelo Ball here in this exercise for sure. So this is just the most no-brainer pick of the whole thing.
I think that bit should have gone number 1. Forget the players. I didn't know we were doing bits. This is great.
You also, I'm not going to be able to talk for the rest of the podcast. You also have pick number 6.
Thank you. Okay. Well, for the Orlando Magic, I really like what I've seen from Paolo Banchero, and it just feels like why not just let him stay on the same team. So I'm taking him. There's a lot of arguments here. There's several guys who could be you have Chet, you have Scotty Barnes. Who else do you guys consider here if you had the 6th pick? That I think Paolo would be the way to go.
Yeah, I think even for me, who I'm anchored to having to say no matter what that Jalen Williams is better than Paolo, who I do have 1 spot ahead of him. I think that's reasonable just because I think you mentioned Chet, you mentioned Zion, and Barnes. Those are the only guys I'd really seriously consider there. Anybody got anybody else?
Barnes was the one that so Paolo was similar on my board. I would get hung up between him and Scotty Barnes. I like that Joey took him because I do feel that Paolo Banchero's ceiling is just so underrated because the Magic refused to surround him with actual spacing. Right. And that just muddies the fact that he's as good as he is and he's been working within dog shit, not even spacing, but around dog shit shooting. And look, KCP's going to help. I don't know if it's going to get much better next season because they didn't get that hot. They didn't get someone who sets the table for others. They didn't get someone who takes jumpers off the dribble. They didn't even get KCP's not a super high volume guy either. And so you're betting just the fact that his step back started to fall last year. I think he's better on defense than a lot of people give him credit for. And he just has so many counters on the offensive end to actually work within that shitty, half-court offensive environment. I honestly wonder, had you put, even league average shooters around him, are we just talking about Banchero before we're talking about John Morant or Tyrese Maxey or maybe, I might put him on the same level as Tyrese Halliburton. That's how much I believe in this kid, just because the circumstances in Orlando have been offensively just not ideal.
Well, we're never going to know because Joey just put him back on the Magic.
I know.
Oops. But they have KCP now. Maybe we got hope. I mean, probably you're going to lose Jalen Suggs in this exercise as well. So they actually might have to have more shooting in the backcourt now.
Jalen Suggs was their best shooter last year.
Yeah. Okay, fine. But they're also going to lose Franz Wagner. That
might help their spacing if we're going to be brutal.
Yeah.
Pick number 7 goes to Jay.
Well, I'm glad to see Zion didn't go to a city with a nightlife because that might have been a disastrous pick. But I think I'm going to put Zion in Portland. I know all the arguments against him. I know his health is very questionable, but his ceiling's just too tantalizing for me to pass up. I just think if he ever gets it together, He can be a singular talent, and I know it's not looking likely at this point, but on the off chance that it does come together, I want to have a shot at that. So Zion at 7.
Where does Zion go if injuries aren't a factor? If we just remove those from the equation?
I don't think any lower than 4, probably.
Yeah. I mean,
I
he
think
may even
that's
go
right.
3.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like that game against the Lakers in the play-in was just like oh my God, this is what we've all been waiting for. And then of course he got hurt, but like the flashes that he's shown, like his upside is nearly unmatched. It's just like, can you be betting on him? But especially at number 7 here, I think it's a worthwhile gamble.
What is the downside for him aside from the injuries and like when he goes to Dallas?
Just the roster building stuff, right? It's all the New Orleans stuff where it's like, well, you have a primary ball handler that is not your typical primary ball handler size or position. You have to find a ton of shooting around him. You have to compensate for him on defense. It's kind of I don't know. It's not. He's super talented, obviously, and I do think he's probably the last guy on the list where you'd say, I think he can be the best, like our number 1 option / best player on a team that wins really big. Like everybody, maybe with some exceptions, I think he's maybe the last guy there. But yeah, it's not easy to build around him, but that's fine in Portland just because you do have a ton of guards, a couple of whom can shoot, and you've got a million centers. Maybe one of them will
None of whom
eventually
could shoot.
space. Yeah, none of them. Maybe
can shoot. I apologize.
Yeah. So he's just not. He's not the cleanest. He's not the most plug and play guy, I guess is what I'd say.
Grant, you are on the clock at what pick are we up to? 8?
Yeah, we're at 8. Potentially
will the Bulls be trading this pick for a veteran?
Yeah, right. I would like to package this and several future firsts to Orlando for. Do they still have Vucevic? So I can just recreate. So this guy's 5th on my board, and I'm going to take Chet Holmgren.
Okay.
I feel like maybe that's higher than some people had him, but I just think Chicago now has a center that like a modern player that they can really truly build around, can help them be potentially great on both ends. Just like there aren't bigs that can potentially win Defensive Player of the Year, could potentially shoot 40% on decent volume from 3, and can handle like he really is pretty close to a unique player. And I think what we saw last year, in which he played all 82 games after missing the rookie season, so I'm not super worried about the foot anymore. That he was very durable. I just think he brings so much at a position where he does all the normal center stuff, and then he does a million things that you don't get from centers. So I just think as a building block, it's hard to do a lot better than that at number 8.
I don't have an issue with that. I think that maybe for some people it might be tough for them to envision, like, what does Chet Holmgren look like outside of, if he has to generate more of his own offense or be responsible for more of the offense. And my point would be, I think he'll look great. That's why I'm excited that they got rid of Josh Giddey and they brought in guys, none of whom dominate the ball, like in Alex Caruso, Isaiah Hartenstein. And so I think they're going to increase his ball handling responsibilities, especially in lineups that have only one of SGA or Jalen Williams. So I'm excited to see that. And I think you probably could have made a case for him like a pick or 2 earlier, honestly, in my opinion. I don't know if anyone disagrees with that.
Yeah. I mean, I had him 9th on my board, but that isn't like a reflection of him being bad. It's just there's a lot of really good players who got drafted in the last 5 years. And, I think it's a completely defensible pick here at 8. So I have no issue with it, Grant.
I badly didn't want him to leave the Thunder that I stuck him in their spot at number 14 when we first threw it up
14. I do think like if I were arguing against it, I'd say you probably, if there are still any left, want to be taking a guy who can be your primary ball handler, like shot creator, and that's not really what he is. So I think it's fair if you've got him lower, but I wasn't going to let him get past there. Especially Chicago is such a fit for him, I think.
The foot injury too, like missing his first year, that might be something that could prohibit some people from taking him. This next pick at number 9, unless anyone has further Chet Holmgren thoughts for the Hawks, I have Scotty Barnes. I think that you're speaking of someone who could be an offensive hub. I think he showed a lot of growth as a playmaker, as a multi-level scorer last year. I've said this like 80 times to Grant. had he met the games played threshold, he would have been my most improved player pick, including for some of the work he did on defense. I think he probably has more strides to go there. We have to ask, okay, is the outside shooting real? I think it's more real than not, even if you think that, the first half of the year when he's hitting his pull-up jumpers, and then the second half of the year when he's not really hitting them, even if you have questions about that, I like the across the boardness of his skill set right now to where, okay, will he ever be a dominant player at X? I don't know, but he could be a second tier, like he could be an all-star level player in all these different areas that I don't know that I need him to be an all NBA or MVP type candidate in one area of the game. And so I would be excited. I mean, with Trae Young in Atlanta, that gets a little iffy, but maybe we can trade him to San Antonio and get some of our picks back and just build around Scotty. And I guess Jalen Johnson could go in this draft. But like, I think Scotty's also shown that he could play next to Trae Young. Like he's someone you could use as a screener or just as like the second side ball handler too. So I like his malleability. Again, he's not as plug and play as a Chet Holmgren, but if you're going to get the offensive creation, I think it's okay to say, oh, he's like sort of scalable. I'll roll the dice there then.
Yeah, I mean, and it gives you a good backstop in case you do trade Trae. Like you will still have some sort of primary ball handler, playmaker without DeJounte Murray now. And so it gives you that sort of like backstop in case you want your picks back, but you also don't want to be, the 2021 Detroit Pistons.
So we've yet to have like anyone try to override anybody yet, where it's like, no, like, that guy's way too high.
It's going to come later.
Yeah.
I mean, the last 10 or so picks, I think, are going to be very difficult.
Can I ask a question then? Because I did think about this. I thought about taking LaMelo. Would there have been pushback there?
I would have pushed back pretty hard, I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but I don't listen to you, so I'm asking you.
I think
Push back
LaMelo,
from anyone whose opinion you value.
yeah, LaMelo would have been a totally fair pick. I mean, it all comes down to shot creating, and I mean, that's one of the most important skills, obviously. Scotty Barnes does some of that, but LaMelo Ball does a ton of that.
Yeah.
So, in my opinion, at least it would have been defensible. So, yeah.
Well, Joe Lacob would have called you on that one and told you to pass on him too. Factor that one in.
Speaking of Joe Lacob, like, is there a way to get LaMelo in touch with like Steph's ankle guy? Like, has that happened yet?
Well, I mean, that would have been part of my pushback. Is like in addition to some other stuff, like how this is 2 years now that we should probably wait to talk about.
I would have then
LaMelo
just gestured to Steph Curry start of his career and then yelled at you for like, would you not take Steph in this because of his ankle?
Well, you can check the archives. It's at least 10 years old, but I did write about how I'm not sure about if this is the right risk reward calculus when they signed Steph to that like 4 years or 55 or whatever.
I think I called it an overpay when it happened.
Pretty much.
This is why it's good that old BR articles are like so irreparably broken you can't even find them on the internet anymore. So I definitely have some strong Evan Turner takes from back in the day that never see the light of day.
I
still look. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say I called the Alan Crabb contract in 2016 a bargain.
I still look back at that Steph thing and think like, made some good points there, but this is still ultimately just like the worst take I've probably ever had.
I do like that we found a way to turn Scotty Barnes' pick into we wound up at Steph Curry and Alan Crabb, and good job by us.
All right, well, I'll get us back on track at number 10. And Dan, frankly, this might be the first time I generate pushback, or any of us generate pushback. You guys have taken 9 of the top 10 on my board, and frankly, this guy, I think I'm just way higher on him than consensus, but Alperen Şengün would be my pick in terms of best player available. Now, this is weird because Cleveland is definitely going to lose Evan Mobley, is very likely going to lose Darius Garland as well. And so all they have left is Donovan Mitchell and Jarrett Allen of their big four. I do not think, if we have concerns about the Mobley-Allen pairing, I think the Şengün-Allen pairing would be even worse. So this would require a follow-up move, presumably, the oft-rumored Allen plus LeVert for Brandon Ingram or something of that ilk. But if I'm just looking at best, yeah, it might. Losing Garland and Mobley is going to probably ruin them either way. But I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm just Nikola Jokic pilled, and after seeing him and what a big passing center can do for your entire offense. Like Şengün, I think, is probably the closest thing to that, with all due respect to Sabonis out there in Sacramento. So I'm at least going to throw his name out there, but I am very open to push back on this pick specifically because of the wonky fit in Cleveland.
I don't know.
I think as a best player oh, go ahead.
You have a hotter take. You think he's the best player available?
I think as a best player available, he's justifiable, but I will say, like, I would have definitely taken bet on LaMelo Ball's upside over Şengün's. But I mean, the stuff he did last year was absolutely nasty, and he's probably a little bit more. I know people got caught up in how the Rockets played without him. They kind of began their hot streak with him, and so I think it's easier to build an offense where, to me, I view it this way. I find it harder to build an offense around Domas Sabonis than I would around Alperen Şengün. I think that there are more, either you have to cater more to Sabonis' strengths on the offensive end, and then on the defensive end, I think that Sabonis is just a weaker defender, whereas like Şengün still has some of the position, like the spatial awareness. I think he has down a little bit better than Sabonis.
I mean, I'm trying to I think as a best player available, it's like we're still in a situation where you could take 5 or 6 guys and it would be hard. I just can't decide how much I care about fit at this. Like, it should that maybe that's ultimately where it is, and the fit is weird. But like, there are a lot of teams where the fit would be weird if they have a normal center that's half decent at all. It's strange. Like, he just has to play center. I don't know. Can I give some names that I have above him just on my informal board and see if anybody wants to like chomp at those? So
no.
I'll leave Jalen Williams out. He is above him, but I recognize I'm not a rational person about him. I have Mobley above Şengün just on my big board. So that, and then Cade Cunningham, LaMelo, Dan, and then I actually have Desmond Bane. I could probably be convinced that Desmond Bane does not belong there. But does anybody jump at any of those as like, oh, he's clearly better than Şengün? Because I'm not sure I do.
What? No, you're saying that Şengün's clearly better than them, rather?
No, I have those guys are above him on my board, but it's in like a negotiable range. It's not like a drop off like there was after Halliburton at 3, for example.
I mean, I have LaMelo is like in that department for me, and then J-Dub, and even I think Desmond Bane. And I'm just such a believer in Cade, but when you're like kind of basing this off track record a little bit, and I have not weighted as much fit. Like, I have fun talking about the fit of Şengün on what this roster would be, but when I'm actually making the pick, I'm just trying to take the best player that's there. But we're in, I think you phrased it best, like super negotiable territory at this point.
Yeah. Plus, he's got to have been I'm not looking it up, but like Şengün must have been closer to an all-star nod than any of the guys we just talked about for various reasons. But just last year, like, his numbers are ridiculous. I don't think I can talk you out of it, Bryan, ultimately.
You did manage to put him on a team with even worse spacing, though, than
Donovan Mitchell's going to carry. It's going to be, you know what? We're gonna turn Allen and LeVert into some mythical floor spacer. Maybe we'll just get Lauri Markkanen back. Maybe we'll just.
That'd be perfect, actually.
All right. Well, if no one has any severe objections, I will stick with Şengün at 10. I'm back on the clock with Sacramento at 11. And this is like the opposite problem because they won't lose. Fox is 2017. Sabonis was before this as well. They won't lose DeMar, obviously. Keegan Murray, I guess, is the one guy.
Just draft him and keep the band together. Makes our jobs a lot easier, too.
Yeah. I don't think I'm going that route, with all due respect to Keegan Murray. Maybe on my next pick, but it won't be to Sacramento. Oh, man. I mean, I think I'd be torn between Mobley and J-Dub here, but I know J-Dub is not making it back to me if I let him slip to Grant. So, I mean, I actually like the theoretical fit of Fox, J-Dub, DeMar, Sabonis, and Malik Monk. Like, just go all in on offense, but J-Dub can also be the one semi-impactful defender in that lineup. So I would lean toward him because the Mobley Sabonis fit just breaks my brain in not a good way.
Mobley, Sabonis, and DeRozan is super brain breaking too when you consider DeRozan as well. Yeah.
Might be the worst. It'd be like the most 90s ass team in the 2020s.
I feel like my feelings are known on this issue. You know who I think you should take.
If you were going for fit, though, do you think you should have skewed towards someone who's more of a caps lock shooter, like a Desmond Bain?
Like a Desmond Bain. Yeah.
Then Jalen Williams.
I'm saying if he was accounting for fit in Sacramento.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, Desmond Bain's a better shooter, but like J-Dub shot like 43% last year.
Yeah.
And I think positionally, like he's just bigger than Bain. So like, look, big surprise. I'm making the J-Dub case. Yeah, put him in the sheet. It's done.
Yeah, I when I'm picking these guys, I'm mostly focused on BPA, but I'm using kind of fit as a tiebreaker. So I totally Bain would have been great, but I think the two-way upside of J-Dub is hard to turn down.
Joey J, any like pushback there? Or you with it?
No, none.
No, I think Grant's his enthusiasm for J-Dub is infectious. So
I can do another 20 minutes if you want. Like, now's our time.
That puts me on the board at number 12. I want to take Evan Mobley just because Gobert and Karl Anthony Towns and Evan Mobley and not like we could run all centers and it'll just be great. They got Luka Garza back too, right? So we could just play. We'll have two shooters even in that lineup. And Mobley is tempting in a vacuum. I'm not picking him. Spoiler alert. I'm gonna ride for a guy here in a second. But Mobley's intriguing because he did shoot like 42% when he comes back from that injury on above the break threes. The volume was low, under 2 attempts per game, and he didn't up the volume in the playoffs, and his efficiency plummeted. And like that's the aspect of his game that I think even if he's playing as the center, you still want him to develop that. Just to make him more versatile if he's not going to have the ball other than someone, okay, you can get him going downhill to the basket, that's fine, but that's prided on. You need some semblance of spacing around him where it can Mobley be some of the floor spacing creator himself. I am going to go with LaMelo Ball, though. I think his passing is transcendent. I think we're talking about, does the gas pedal view kids as targets in his car? I honestly don't know. I hope not. But so there is off-court stuff that you have to worry about, and there's the injury stuff. Of course, we already talked about it. I'm just betting on give me this bigger dude who is standing between. There was an argument in our Discord, not argument, but debate whether he's like 6'5" or 6'7". He's somewhere between 6'5" or 6'7". And so to have that size for someone who's running your offense, and who, by the way, is a great fit alongside Anthony Edwards and just this roster in general, he can be disruptive defensively and just like the passing. Like it'd be nice. He's getting to the basket more, but it'd be nice if he could finish better. The passing, half court, full court, whatever he's doing, he's an angelic passer. Like he's just celestial when it comes to that stuff. So I'm going to roll the dice here on those ankles of his holding up long term.
I'm not sure the morning talk shows can handle LeVar and Ant in the same room, but other than that, I like the pick.
I do have to remind you guys that poor Anthony Edwards is now not on the team anymore in this hypothetical.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
Right.
So
that's even better. They need
they need LaMelo even more now. That's
right.
Thank you, Joey, for bolstering my decision. I really appreciate it.
All right. I feel good about this at 13 for Indiana. I think it has to be Evan Mobley. I understand that
Siakam disagrees.
The Siakam, Mobley, Turner front line, like I guess Siakam's just a really oversized three. Not worried because I think Mobley can guard any three that you put in front of him. So defensively, that's fine. And just like big picture, Indiana, which unfortunately did lose Tyrese Halliburton, so maybe their whole identity changes. It's still a team that can't guard. So I just think Mobley is pretty clearly the best defender left on the board. So it has to be him. And we're just going to worry about, like, can we really play, three essentially bigs together? I think it works partly because of the spacing you get from Miles Turner. So I think I'm open to arguments, but I think the fit there is pretty good.
I would love to see that in action because I have no idea whether it would be super effective or sort of just like a car crash theory where you can't look away and it is really bad, but I want to find out. So I respect the decision and I would support it.
That is a tepid endorsement. I feel like I'd like to see how weird it would be.
Isn't he clearly who would be your other best player available candidates right here? Does anyone have Mobley like lower than this?
No, he was mine. I mean, Franz, Cade, I guess. And if you're worried about Indiana losing Halliburton and needing a point guard, that's one thing. But you could also be banking on, I mean, Andrew Nembhard is not guaranteed to be picked in this, and you could just be willing to turn it over to him. Also, Miles Turner is no stranger to the trade block. So if you end up moving Miles Turner, who's on the $19.9 million expiring contract, like actually Siakam Mobley as a, the long-term front court pairing, I think could be very interesting together.
Jay, you're on the clock at number 14, rounding out the lottery here.
Well, we have OKC. I think this is maybe the first time that team need is really going to play into the decision, just because Holmgren's elsewhere now, and OKC is pretty stacked. So I think I'm gonna go with Franz Wagner to kind of replace some of those front court minutes and some of that scoring. But I'm open to criticism there. I know we still have Cade on the board. I don't know who else would be. We've got Desmond Bane. I mean, but I think Franz kind of fills that front court void, even though, not exactly the same skill set as Chet. We also lost J-Dub as well. So, I mean, I think that there's the argument there, like two big voids in the front court.
Yeah, it's tough, because the Thunder have been robbed of more players than anybody else. So this new version of them is tricky. I think because you've still got SGA here. You've got Lou Dort for the moment. Probably you're going to have him. So you kind of have a clean slate a little bit. Yeah, I think this is almost a best player available, right? Just because they've lost two of their three best guys.
Mm-hmm. And I would think a lot of best guys, Cade doesn't really make sense next to SGA, I don't think. Mm-hmm. Same with Emmanuel Quickly would be another BPA.
You don't think they could play off each other? The Thunder just lost their second best creator, and there's no Josh Giddey breakout coming, and so we're just banking on Case and Wallace, I'm assuming he won't go in this exercise. But
what about Bane? Bane doesn't overlap with SGA at all, but he doesn't give you he's I guess kind of undersized. Yeah, I don't know. Franz is pretty solid, I think.
Yeah, good pick.
Joey, you are up at number 15.
I am, and the Pelicans have lost Zion in this exercise, so I would love to take a big guy, but it just doesn't feel like there's a good center option here. Probably for me, Lively would be the first name, and I just feel like that's a lot pretty early for 15. So I might try to do something like move DeJounte Murray to shooting guard and move CJ McCollum to the bench and try to get a point here, just because I don't know what else to do, and I think the highest upside is Cade Cunningham. But I'm totally willing to. Anyone have any other thoughts? Let me know.
I love that pick. That is my thought.
I think that's pretty clearly it.
Okay,
that's a good one.
Well, keep talking about it for another minute so that I can think about my next pick.
Does anyone have BTJ? I mean, the fit, that's a really good fit, and then you're just super huge, I guess, because you lost Zion here, so there's not going to be overlap with trying to get ball handling. I think that's even if you didn't think Cade Cunningham was the best player available, that fit right now, I think is super intriguing.
I had him at 12. He was my best guy left, I think, by a decent margin. So I think, you're covering it from every direction by putting him there.
Yep. I'm just happy that we're 15 picks in, and the top 15 guys on my list are gone. So at least we are, according to my rankings, we're doing a good job.
This needs to be more contentious, though. So I'm going to throw my next pick and select someone that I know you all will disagree with.
RJ Barrett.
No, Deuce McBride. That is the pick.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
So 16, it's the Raptors. They've lost Scotty Barnes. So this is a really wide open pick. And I think it's just truly best player available. And that could go a couple ways, but it might be Desmond Bane. If they don't lose quickly, that would be nice. So they would have a point guard or a combo guard there. But yeah, again, more so than any pick I've had so far, totally willing to hear people out and change the pick.
I think it is Bane. He's the highest. He's my best player left. I guess maybe do we talk about Darius Garland if we assume they're going to lose quickly? That might be a little deep on the board for some people, but that's the only other one I'd really think about.
I personally would think about Devin Vassell, but I would still take Bane.
Well, then that seems like a good enough endorsement.
do it.
So let's go with Bane there.
Jay, please take care of my Knicks at number 17.
Oh man, well I don't know if I can handle the pressure here, but so the Knicks have not lost anybody, which is good for me, but I don't know what that says about their drafting over the last few years. But
Nice.
Man, nothing clearly stands out to me. I mean, you have Garland, but you don't necessarily need a ball handler. You have Jalen Brunson still there. I think I don't know. Brandon Miller might be blocked a little bit. We have Quickly on the board, who could go back to New York. I'm very open to suggestions here, but I think I might go Quickly. But
Bring him back. Bring him back.
I got a lot of guys that everyone I go down, it's just like, I don't know, but it's the Knicks. The Knicks haven't lost anybody, like you said, and so it's like, well, these guys are all weird fits or duplicative or whatever. Dan, chime in for Knicks needs here. Like, they got to get another big, right? Like, I mean, if you're just going with player, roster deficiencies, they got Hartenstein's gone, Mitchell Robinson can't stay healthy. So do we think centers? And then if you're doing that, you're reaching pretty deep down the list, I'd say.
So the two players I thought of was, in keeping with the theme of to unseat Jay's Celtics, Devin Vassell would just make a lot of sense of having Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, and Devin Vassell's just ridiculous. Even though Devin Vassell's not a great defender, if he's all of a sudden like your third or fourth most important defender, it's a different story. The guy that I did think about here was Jabari Smith. I don't think Tibbs would use him properly. And he would be more inclined, like if this was his pick, Derek Lively would be on this team right now. I think that's pretty clear. So you could go that route, but I do think best player available, to me, there's a better debate to be had where if you went the Quickly route, the Vassell, it would be a perimeter player versus we could have a debate about it, but I don't think that I could take, from a pure talent in a vacuum standpoint, Jabari Smith or Derek Lively right here.
I don't know. I mean, your argument is kind of leaning me toward Vassell at this point. I mean, especially since they don't necessarily need him to be, their A1, A2 defender. So
spicy take too. Devin Vassell. I mean, Julius Randle's still there, but if you think you might move Randle, you're going to lose him because you don't sign him to an extension and you trade him, or if you just think, okay, we want our third best shot creator and we have Mikal Bridges. Devin Vassell is better at that than Mikal Bridges. He's not the same level of passer. He's not the same level of cutter. He's not the same level of defender, but he is better at getting to his spot, coming around ball screens. And that's someone, they probably would prefer to I think Quickly you could argue might be the better fit is like the actual point guard type, and for what he does defensively at the point of attack. But that would be my spicy take if you were considering pivoting, is that he leapfrogs Mikal Bridges in the shot creator pecking order for me.
Well,
go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and, as my co-GM and in honor of you calling me a sociopath the other day, which I greatly appreciated, I think I'm going to pivot and throw in Vassell.
I dig it. That'd be a fun perimeter trio, right? Vassell, Bridges, and OG.
Absolutely.
That's tough.
Grant, what were you going to say?
I was going to just try to complicate it by throwing out like, well, do we want lower usage guys like a Trey Murphy or something like that? Or do you want to go Nick Claxton if you're still thinking about how do we get some big man minutes covered? The other thing is, like, we haven't really reached into I'm trying to look at the list now. Most of these guys are from some of the earlier draft classes other than like Chet and Wemby. So I'm waiting for someone to take like the pure upside play of someone that's had like just their rookie year and you're banking on.
Let's go. You're on the
no. This I really don't want. I don't want. Okay, so we're gonna have to talk through this one. So I have the Warriors here at 18.
Grant, just reminding you, Wiseman's on the board.
I know. Well, unfortunately, there's also another Warrior on the board that I could irrationally take a little high here.
If you take Kuminga, that's where this podcast will end.
Do we need this to be more interesting? Because I'm willing to do it. Darius Garland's my best player available. That makes no sense. So we can't take him.
Okay.
Technically, Brandon Miller is next. And I'm kind of warming to the idea of him because if the issue with the Warriors is they don't, now I'm not ruling out Kuminga because I'm not allowed to do that contractually. They don't have a guy that's like, there's your second star. I think Brandon Miller, based on his rookie year, like remember like one of the knocks on him was that it's like, well, he feels kind of like a second star to me, and he outplayed that as a rookie. But if that's the floor, then that kind of like fits a little bit here, and mixed with the fact that he is the second best guy I have on my board, I'm leaning Brandon Miller. But I would love to hear other nominations here.
Well, if you took Trey Murphy, it would make me not have to regret the Moody over Murphy on draft day. I'm still living in a world of the Warriors have a 1% chance of winning it all next year, which is about 1% too high. And I don't want you to take Brandon Miller and have to wait 2-3 years before he is who he is. But from like a non-Warrior perspective, it makes a ton of sense because they really do need like a guy who's going to lead the next era. And I don't know if Kuminga is that. I think Brandon Miller would be a better top option in a few years. So anyway, I kind of support it and I kind of don't.
So that raises a good that you raised the point I didn't really think about. Like, who's the guy that is the best player tomorrow? Not Brandon Miller might be the best pick here in 3 years.
Yeah.
But who's the guy if they're saying we're trying to still build the best possible contender around Steph? Is there someone that's older that's maybe more topped out that would justify being taken here? Like, is it like Herb Jones? Like, I don't know. That doesn't. I'm trying to think.
Lou Dort, Jaden McDaniels. If you're trying to still cake in upside, maybe it's Jaden McDaniels. But I don't know that if you go with Brandon Miller, and maybe if you went with this is again doesn't fit into the motif that you were just trying to outline. But if you were looking to kind of get that second someone who might hit stardom or quasi stardom while Steph is still there, like maybe Jabari. I don't.
Yeah.
Jalen Green, maybe. I feel like that could be disastrous.
No, I think Jabari is interesting because he would solve a lot of problems they have where you get some spacing from a big guy that can guard. I don't know. I'm still leaning Miller, even though it does like what this will be the third timeline if I take Brandon Miller here. So I think just for novelty's sake, I'm going to do Brandon Miller at 18.
Which leaves me at 19 for the Nets, who just have nothing at this point. So I can go whatever route I want. I think my best player, like in a vacuum right now, is Darius Garland. And so I think I have to go that route. They need a point guard of the future anyway, so this ends up fitting. And he is also someone, I don't think we saw it as often this past season, but Cleveland was so stop and start with their availability at the top. When you look at the injuries to like everybody in their top four, basically, that this might actually end up, if we circled back and like evaluated these results in a year, 2 years, 3 years, it might look egregious that he dropped all the way to 19, even if you're doing best player available or fit. So he is pretty scalable as a point guard type. But in this situation, he gets to run the show, which per reports, while he's willing to stay in Cleveland, probably because he has no leverage and his trade value bottomed out, we've seen him make an all-star game in that type of a role.
Yeah, he goes like 5, 6, 7 spots higher if we're doing this, based on where his reputation was a year ago. I think just the injuries to start this season threw it off track, and like pretty solid value there. He was definitely the best player I had left too.
I'm mad that no one else is mad.
I wish you could have taken Brandon Miller there, because Brooklyn kind of needs to rebuild, but then instead Grant is saying the Warriors are rebuilders. So okay.
That's the quiet part loud with that.
Well, as the owner of the next 2 picks with the Grizzlies and Jazz, I am mad that you took Garland, because I was hoping he fell to one of them. Because the Grizzlies, having lost John Morant, desperately need a point guard now. They also lost Desmond Bane, so their backcourt is Marcus Smart and
Vince Williams,
Derek Williams,
Gigi Jackson. Let's go. So I think I'm leaning toward Emmanuel quickly here. He's the best player I got left on my board, and I think he'd fill a huge positional need for them. So barring any drastic objections, let's lock it in quickly with the Grizzlies at number 20.
Yep, no problem with that.
Love it.
I think that's an excellent fit now too. Obviously. And look, him and Smart, kind of nasty defensively, right? So
yeah,
you are now on the clock at number 21 as well.
Great, yeah. So Utah, I don't think they've actually lost anyone yet.
Nope.
Great sign. Cool. Okay, we're still trying to figure out the Lauri Markkanen thing. So honestly, like, this is probably the hardest team to do for this entire exercise, because who knows what direction they'll be going in 3 weeks. Assuming that they keep Markkanen and are looking for, quote unquote, a second star, I think, like Jabari Smith, I think there's too much positional overlap. Same with Keegan Murray. I know we've seen Markkanen play the 3 in Cleveland, especially, but I'd probably look for either a wing or a guard here. And I'm a very big believer in Jalen Johnson, but I think the guy on the board who's left, who still has that, like, could be a star upside, even if the floor is probably lower than Utah would like, is Jalen Green. And maybe I'm just buying into the Mickey Mouse March that he just had. but it just sounds like Utah is hunting for, we need someone else who can be this primary option and have Markkanen get bumped down a peg. And like, I just don't see that for real. I mean, a lot of these other guys left on the board are great players, great complementary fits, but I think Jalen Green's the only one left, arguably, with that type of a ceiling.
I like the logic. It's hard to argue. I think that's right. It's just like the highest ceiling, lowest floor probably of the last few picks.
I just feel like, can I ask, why is it, and I'm not saying anyone here views it differently, why was it different this year that he had a good run towards the end of the season when that's just been his MO? Is it like, why is this time different than the other two? Is it just because more people were watching the Rockets because they had like bigger like names and Şengün was playing well? I know he got injured towards the end of the season. I'm having trouble. Yeah, he had an incredible stretch. I'm just having trouble wrapping my mind around why we're buying into it now when this has just been the trend for 3 years.
I get it's because probably several of you guys know, because you read it. I cited it a million times. They won. They were 13-2 like during, I think it's March, and that's coincides mostly with Green just losing his mind as a scorer. So like, that's, to me, that's the only difference. I don't know how persuasive that should be, but I think that's all it is that his hot streak at the end of the year coincided with team success.
Anyone else? Is anyone else a believer in Jalen Green? Grant's like a convert. I feel like he hammered Jalen Green for the first like 2/3 of the season, and then he converted towards the end. I'm not saying you're doing this new now. You were on it for a while. What was happening? But it was one of your bigger about faces, if I remember.
Yeah, I think like I went from this guy has no chance to be like a winning NBA player to like, oh, actually, I think maybe now I view him more like Bryan described him, of like, it's not a definite, but in terms of upside, like his scoring ability is, there's nobody else left has it. Like that's where we are in the draft.
Yeah, it makes sense. It also makes sense for me as a Warriors fan when Jalen Green shoots 33% for the first month and the Jazz are 0-16 and then they have to trade Markkanen or feel like they should to the Warriors. So thank you, Bryan, for that.
Long game.
You're welcome. Yeah. To be clear, I am not like sold on Jalen Green. I recognize the floor is a lot lower for him than for like a Jalen Johnson or even a Trey Murphy, but this is just purely a ceiling play because the Jazz are just like the one place they don't want to be is where they are right now, where it's like they're not even stuck in the middle. They're stuck in like purgatory. And I think Jalen Green forces their hand one way or the other. He either hits the ceiling,
yeah, right there you go,
they get out a good way, or he tanks and they trade Markkanen, and then they've got Jordan Poole 2.0 on their hands.
Yeah,
I just find it fascinating that someone who watched Tobias Harris's floor over the past half decade is like prepared to take someone as low floor as Jalen Green. So that was interesting.
Tobias Harris didn't have a ceiling. There's the difference. Yeah. It was just low floor, low ceiling.
So the Lakers are on the clock at number 22. I am primarily responsible for them. My best player available is probably Denny Avdia at this point, but I don't love that. They need someone, like anyone who qualifies as like a two-way wing or combo forward, but I want a little bit more shooting, even though he brings more ball handling. I'm going to go with Trey Murphy here. I think just that motion shooting alongside or surrounding LeBron and AD, and I'm assuming JJ Redick will let him operate in motion. Maybe Bronny James will set him up for a couple assists on his drives when he inevitably plays during the season. But I love the fit. I think he probably has a ways to go. I think his defensive reputation has become a little overinflated at this point. But I actually think that his offensive skill set could be deeper, where people think of him, he's taking ultra deep threes and people are setting him up. Like, he's got some just pizzazz to him if you give him a little bit of space on the ball. And so if the Lakers do decide to trade D'Angelo Russell, that's someone who can maybe pick up some of the, like, just not even secondary, but just like tertiary ball handling responsibilities.
Yeah, I like that one. Do you think, since it's the Lakers, they might have been the Jalen Green spot? Which, like, are they hunting for the guy that could be the third star? Because that's not Murphy, but I think Murphy's probably the most sensible fit.
Yeah, I mean,
it might be Jalen Johnson if they're like, we need the most star upside.
I thought about him too, because I love Jalen Johnson or even Naz Reid alongside Anthony Davis, but this team just needs shooting so badly.
Mhm.
So Trey Murphy just feels like if we're considering fit at all, I think you could make a case if you wanted to that he'll have a better career than Denny Avdia or Jaden McDaniels or Jabari. Like Jabari Smith was tempting. I'm in the bag for Jabari Smith, but like he could play next to AD and LeBron, but it's just I'm trying to I have to wait fit a little bit. It seems like based off how this podcast is going.
Sure. Well, yeah. All right. Okay. There's nothing further on Trey Murphy. I have Dallas at 23. So they haven't lost anybody, but they will probably lose Derek Lively, which makes it semi-reasonable to just take him here. I don't know how exciting that is. He's not this high on my board, but Dallas made the finals, so should we just keep that team together? Like, there's a decent argument to be made that you just have Lively come back. But I kind of want a Derek Jones replacement. This version has Klay Thompson, so the shooting is semi-solved, maybe. But let me ask you guys, of the following players, who is the highest on your board? I'm like looking at a type here. Jalen Johnson, Herb Jones, Jonathan Kuminga, Jabari Smith. Like, who do you have highest out of those guys?
I have Jabari the highest.
Okay. Anybody have somebody else?
I have Jalen Johnson the highest, and then Jabari second.
Man. So nobody has Jonathan Kuminga highest, is what I'm hearing.
Joe Lacob.
I would love to have a conversation about him if you just want to take him. So go ahead.
No, I don't think I can do that. I mean, if I'm going by my board, I should. So I think it is between Johnson and Jabari. Man, that's tough. We've only had one great year from Johnson. Jabari's had two solid ones. I think the defensive upside's higher with Jabari, probably. But other than that, Johnson's got a lot of advantages on him.
Jabari's kind of like, what if Maxi Kleber was still good?
Yeah, right. And he can get his own a little bit. That's the other thing. No scenario on Dallas do we need someone that can individually shot create just because Luka and Kyrie, that's issue handled. So I think probably, I don't know. I'm going to go Jabari. But it's really close with him and Jalen Johnson, I think. And if I were allowed to be as biased as I want to be, Jonathan Kuminga.
I mean, Jabari's bigger too. So if you're thinking lob threats for Luka, Jabari's probably more in that ilk. And especially if you're worried about
a home run fit pick that you just made.
Well, and Bryan, you were about to say, were you about to say, Bryan, if you lose Lively, Jabari makes some sense.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a chance that you lose. Gafford is technically eligible for this draft as well, but you're probably not going to lose both of them at this point. I mean, there's only 7 picks left, and I think so I think you'll have at least one of them, and then if you're looking for this guy could fill in as a front court replacement if I do lose one of them, whereas they just double down they have Klay, Najee Marshall now on the wing. I like it. I like it a lot.
Yeah. This team, Dallas, is huge now. If you're talking if gonna lose Lively, but if you have Smith and Luka and PJ Washington and Klay is still big for a win, it's an interesting team. We're getting into the territory where these teams aren't losing a lot of guys because they've been good. They don't have a lot of young players, so all these teams are going to seem unfairly improved from here on, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're just stacking teams here, but the next one is actually in, their timeline is kind of at an end with Miami. Jimmy Butler's 34. He's going into the last year, guaranteed year of his contract. So I think, it's tough. I mean, Bam's 27 and it's probably going to be his team soon. So it's not necessarily they need to go into full rebuild mode soon. And we're with Jimmy in tow, we're still looking at, a win now player. So I'm not necessarily looking for upside here, but that's not to say I'm, averse to it. But given the conversation, I mean, I don't know. I could see Jalen Johnson there. I'm kind of leaning toward there, but I'm still having nightmares about Derek Lively. I'm not sure about in his lobs from last year, but I'm not sure. With Bam in the front court, I'm looking probably toward Jalen Johnson. I think just as the top guy left on the board for me.
He's my best non-warrior available.
I like that pick a lot.
Yeah, and the fit, like he shot threes well enough last year where it's you stick him next to Bam, and I think that can work on offense too. And he just brings all these different dynamics when you're looking at the stuff he could do in the open floor. He's got some ball handling, some counters going downhill. And if he gets better defensively, which I assume he will, and just Miami's, I'm not going to say culture, Miami's system under Coach Alex Spoelstra, like I wouldn't rule out Miami being like, well, let's play Jalen Johnson at the 5 when Bam's catching a breather, and that'd be something I would absolutely watch.
Yeah.
Okay.
All
right.
Joey for 2 here.
Joey.
Yeah. Well, I'm a little surprised Jalen Suggs hasn't been taken, and I absolutely love him. And I wouldn't want him to be a Clipper because he's in the same division as me, but I just don't understand how obviously he gets to play great defense while James Harden just doesn't play any defense. You kind of need a guy like him. So I just think it's an obvious pick.
Yeah, I like that one.
Especially after losing PG and whatever is going on with Kawhi. Was he booted off Team USA because he was injured? Was he actually injured? I just don't. So you lose Paul George. Kawhi's always a question mark. Like, just get someone in there who can, like, caps lock check people on defense.
Yeah, he was on my radar for my next pick, so I like that one.
For 26 with the Suns, I would just love to get Derek Lively. Man, would that make the Suns scary? I mean, the biggest problem with them right now is they just don't. I mean, whenever Nurkic has to defend anything on the perimeter, it's a disaster. It's an interesting one because they could also use like a wing defender, and there's several on the board that could be taken. So I could be talked out of it, but the idea of Lively blocking all these shots and just dominating down low, and the fact that he's just so young and honestly probably should have got taken already based on that alone. Seems like a good pick.
Coach Bud just orgasmed. I'm you want someone who's going to work in his base defense?
You just solved our defense with one guy, basically.
Jay, you have the Sixers. Can you make the wrong pick just to make Bryan irate? That'd be great.
This is crazy. I'm ending up with, I had the Knicks, I had the Sixers. I wish Ben Simmons was in this pool because he would absolutely be the pick. But
sabotage.
We're down at 27. So, and the Sixers have a clear big 3 here: Maxey, PG, Embiid. So
Maxey's gone though. Maxey's no longer
right.
on the team.
I keep forgetting the exercise we're in. Of course, and I took him too. So that kind of does change things for me. So I don't know if there is any, ball handler, like reliable ball handler left at this, or they're just gonna have to sign someone off the free agent heat, 10-day contract it until they solve it. But because the guards list here is looking pretty thin. I mean, I was originally thinking Herb Jones just to kind of round out that wing for the Sixers, but Maxey's departure is really throwing me for a loop, I guess. I mean, I might have to go Nembhard just because we need somebody in the backcourt now, and he was a killer in the playoffs. He looked like he's just kind of like he's taking that next step, and I think given the players left, I think he could really have a lot of upside left. So we'll go Nembhard for Bryan Sixers. I did my best for you, Bryan.
I'm intrigued. Yeah, I mean, I like Keegan Murray, the top guy left on my board, but I don't know fit-wise if he makes a ton of sense especially given the other additions they made this offseason. When you said Herb Jones, honestly, my ears perked up because like he's the only other, like I have Keegan and then Herb is the number 2 guy on my board, and like the defensive potential of Paul George and Herb Jones together, you know, especially what we did recently with the Beat the Celtics project, like a couple of you guys basically just assembled a bunch of wings together, and it kind of seemed like that was the real life Sixer strategy. But now add Herb Jones to the mix, and you know you stand a pretty good chance of making life hell on both the Celtics and the Knicks, who are probably the 2 biggest threats to Philly this year. So it's tough. I mean, I could be swayed either way, but I think, yeah, Nembhard or Jones would be my picks there.
I think Bleacher Report commenters will hate you. I think that people who listen to this podcast will love you. I love that fit after losing Maxey.
Yeah, you got to get a ball handler, right? Like it's just I don't know who else you would even. I mean, Kobe White. That's
like the other name I thought of. Yeah. Like the defense from Nembhard being able to like kind of have him in the I'll call him the mini like Alex Caruso role, but he's also a ball handler, like a real ball handler at the other end. I really like this pick, Jay. I love the fit.
Yeah, agreed.
All right. Yeah, speaking of the fit, I have Denver here, and like you lose KCP.
Eligible? Does anyone know?
I wish I could extract a promise from you guys that someone will take Jonathan Kuminga or Pods at some point. I'm not going to take either of them now. I can't believe we're going to get through this without either of them. But it has to be Herb Jones, right? Like just slot Herb Jones into KCP's vacated shooting guard spot. You get better defense. You get like at least recently comparable shooting. I don't know that I'd say that's likely going forward, but that's just he's maybe the most win now guy left. He's established, like we know what he is. He's one of the best defenders in the league. Like that's just I don't know who else I'd even really seriously think about other than Herb there.
Agreed.
I think would you have considered, like, do you like him? Is there a chance Jaden McDaniels would be better for this team?
Yeah, I thought about him. Like, again, there's like a clump there with even Keegan Murray too. Like you get the positions get weird there because he's not a 2. I guess McDaniels, you'd feel okay about McDaniels on 2s. I think Herb's a better defender than Jaden McDaniels, like by a pretty like small margin. They're both great. And I just, I don't know. I like Herb a little better, I guess, is what it comes down to. But McDaniels for sure would be another, okay, he just replaces KCP.
I'd like to have a discussion about pick number 29. I feel like Keegan Murray would be the easiest play to fit in here, and it gives Boston sort of that another secondary wing combo forward, which they don't just have. Like, if you replace Sam Hauser's minutes with Keegan Murray, you're better. They're a lot better. But I'm also just kind of wondering, when you factor in like the Porzingis injury and also the fact that they don't have this. I know they have Drew, they have Derek White, they have him. They don't have a cap slot playmaker. Does it make sense to go with another secondary playmaker who's also a combo forward in Denny Avdia? Those are the two that I'm kind of grappling between. On my board, I have Denny Avdia higher. Keegan Murray feels like more of the okay. And Jaden McDaniels, I want someone with more ball skills. Yeah, you could slot him into Boston. Their defense doesn't need him. So those are the two that I've been pinging back and forth, and I was curious if anyone had any strong thoughts as to which way I should be.
I think those are the two. I don't know who else you'd really even. I'm trying to find another name to just make this harder on you.
That's not what I asked for.
The one other guy I've got, at least in my top 30, and he will be under consideration for the Bucks if you pass him up here, is Onyeka Okongwu. If you're really worried about the Porzingis injury and Horford's age, I know the Celtics did just re-sign all of their reserve centers, basically. So maybe they're not super concerned about that. But yeah, otherwise, I think Murray and Avdia are the plays. I would call it like Murray. I have Murray higher than Avdia, but I don't think you can go wrong either way, per se.
I'm just going to go with Keegan Murray. I think his offense is a hair more scalable. I think that Denny's the better player in a vacuum, but Boston doesn't need better players. It needs depth that fits into its structure. And look, they're the 2 highest remaining players on my board anyway. That being said, Denny Avdia has been the highest player on my board for a few picks now. So I'm going to settle on Keegan Murray, who just anyone, I know you guys have noticed, but like he just brings a lot more defensively than I think people realize at this point after the year he had. And so, yeah, the shooting's intriguing, but there's also just the defensive element there where you can kind of move him across the 2, 3, and 4.
Mm-hmm.
Our final pick, Mr. Toporek.
Ooh. Well, we just mentioned Denny, so he's in consideration. Okongwu, I think, is in consideration. Grant, I'll throw you a bone and lie, and I'll say Kuminga's under consideration here.
What about Trace Jackson Davis?
Yeah,
Pick him.
come on. We haven't even mentioned him yet.
Come on.
You know what? All of these guys are under consideration. Some might take a little more consideration than others. The Brook Lopez stuff is weird this offseason. I'm surprised by how much Brook Lopez chatter there is. So that makes me wonder, should I go Okongwu or like Nick Claxton? Probably not Jalen Duren, because the Bucks are very much in a win now window. So that's what makes me nervous even about, I mean, Okongwu for sure, because like he is still more conceptual than actual. We just still you see these flashes and you can envision what he could become, but we haven't seen it full time. I guess he wouldn't have to do that in Milwaukee either, as long as he kept Brook Lopez, but how he would mesh with Bobby Portis is at least a consideration. Part of me thinks pass both of them and just take Lou Dort, just go for the best defender left on the board and, cover up for Dame defensively that way. I know they just signed Gary Trent Jr. and I think part of the appeal was we can promise you the starting shooting guard role, which might not be the case if they got Lou Dort here, but then you have Gary Trent Jr. coming off the bench. So I don't know. This is one where I want to deviate because I don't think Lou Dort is the best player available on the board, but for Milwaukee, he might be the best fit. So curious what you guys think here.
To me, it's him or McDaniels. Those are the two I think.
McDaniels was the name for me that I was thinking of for them because you want more of just the general pop, whereas Lou Dort's kind of more physical. Yeah, some of the pops. I don't think you can go wrong either way, but it would be between those two for me. I guess you have to feel, Lou Dort will get up threes. Whether or not they go in is a different story. Jaden McDaniels he can be both evils, where it's low volume and low efficiency, but we've also seen him be moderate volume, higher efficiency.
Yeah. And I mean, McDaniels gives you insurance against Chris Middleton, who both ankles had
operated on? Wow. Do you think they were just running a buy one, get one? And he was like, yeah, while I'm under, let's just do them both.
Yeah. Right. Well, what about the idea that, to your point, Brian, about what's up with Brook Lopez? If there's a future where the Bucks are mostly, or more than they have been in the past, Giannis at center, you could get away with McDaniels at some 4, and maybe that's his best position. I don't know if Dort is. I don't feel as good about Dort. I mean, he's going to be stronger than whoever he guards, but it's going to hurt your rebounding, that kind of thing. McDaniels' size, I think, maybe might tip it. I don't know, but Dort, I guess maybe it depends on how much you believe in Dort's shooting, because Dan's right. He's going to get them up, and if they fall at 40% or 38%.
But then you can look at it and say, well, we have Gary Trent Jr. and Damian Lillard, and Brook Lopez will stretch the floor as long as they're we're going to get up threes. Grant's point about Jaden McDaniel's size, which I didn't even consider, is Chris Middleton is the de facto 4, might make the most sense, but McDaniels can toggle, it feels between a few more existences than Lou Dort can.
And Trent and Lillard are not a big backcourt. That's pretty undersized. You might need to get some of that back at a different position.
Agreed.
Okay. You guys talk me into McDaniels. I like it.
Hey, collaboration.
Oh, you know the name I didn't think, but maybe should Tari Eason have been considered here?
Isn't he mostly a 4, a pure 4? I don't know. Maybe, yeah. I mean, the defense is there. We're definitely skewing defense for the Bucks. That's for sure.
Yeah, well, when you start Damian Lillard and possibly Gary Trent Jr., I think you kind of have to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the cool thing about this exercise is that we got through 30 names, and there's still a ton of talent on the board. We've brought up a number of them already, but we haven't mentioned, Austin Reeves, Aaron Nesmith, PJ Washington, Cam Johnson, Naz Reid, Jalen Duren. We could easily, we're not going to be clear, but we easily could do a full second round of this and still have, a bunch of very good players available.
Yeah, I thought somebody might reach on one of the Thompsons, just just on pure upside. Maybe let's, before I know, Jay, you have an out. Who's the best player on your board that didn't get taken? Dan, who I'll just go around. Who did you have highest that wasn't drafted, Dan?
Jonathan Kuminga. No, just,
High five. Oh,
no, that wasn't serious. It would be Lou Dort for me. It would be the
Okay.
highest on my board. It wasn't drafted.
What about you, Brian?
It was a Kongwu for me, and that's really just a bet on the upside.
Yeah. Jay?
McDaniels.
Okay. No, he took him.
Oh, no, he did take him. Sorry. Yeah. Then it was
Dort here?
Okongwu. Yeah, he was next.
Okongwu. What about
Yeah.
you, Joey?
Oh, Denny
Oh,
Avdia. I'm sorry. I had him as someone took him. That's such a. I apologize, Denny. I really failed you. I had 6 picks to grab you, and I didn't.
A couple people on my board: Jordan Poole, Trey Jackson Davis, James Wiseman. That was Lakers' board. I'm sorry, I got my boards mixed up. I really like Kobe White. That was my number one guy. So
I had 4 guys in my top 30 still there. Kuminga obviously was my highest. He was at 19 for me. No apologies. Claxton, Kobe White, and then I did have Pods at 30, but that's a pure homer pick.
At least you're honest about it.
Yeah, I can't hide it anymore. It's been long enough.
Who do you think, very quickly before Jay goes, who's the worst player that we took and it was clearly all right? Like we went with the fit here rather than just on the pure talent perspective.
That's tough.
okay. So maybe the biggest reach because the worst player has probably taken the last 3 or 4 picks, but the biggest reach based on fit might be a different conversation, right?
Yeah, I think I can make a case for I took Brandon Miller.
That was the one that stood out. Yeah.
Yeah, to a team that's like, we're trying to win today. Like, we don't need a guy who's in his second season. But I really was just going by my board more than anything there. And I couldn't take Garland. I think Garland was still there, but that made no sense to me for him to go to the Warriors. So, yeah, I'll nominate one of my own as a big reach there.
I actually like the Miller stuff. I know it doesn't make sense timeline wise, but I think he was the best player available. And if you're looking for that bridge to the next, what the post Steph era looks like, I think Brandon Miller probably had the highest upside remaining.
Plus, the Warriors kept Kuminga and Podziemski, so they're just having an embarrassment of riches going forward.
This was loads of fun, guys. Thank you for bringing this project to Grant and I. We will reintroduce you in the outro when we actually record it. I know Jay has to go, so I want to let you go. But this was great, and hopefully we'll get to do more stuff like this again in the future.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Appreciate it, guys.
Thanks.
Well, that was a bunch of fun. Super agreeable on all. We had a couple of debates. I thought it was a good exercise. It vacillating between the thing that I struggled with was were we doing best player available or are we fit and going? So it seems like it was trying to juggle both. And after the first few picks, it got really tough to do that.
Yeah, I think that's just it mirrors how the actual draft goes, right? You're always in the real world, you're always like, well, is this guy's better than this guy, but we need this, and I don't know that there's ever a right answer. So no real shocks here. But I think, really, if anything, surprising amount of depth because there were a lot of good players we didn't draft and even some more we didn't talk about. But yeah, I had fun. I had fun until we finished it and no Warriors were selected.
But as you pointed out, both Pods and Kuminga are still Warriors. And so the pick you made on behalf of the Warriors looks a little bit better, I guess.
It was all part of a grand plan to help them emerge looking best from this exercise. Anything else you want to add or shall we call it?
Let's call it. Are you ready to take us out of here?
Let's call it. Yeah. Thanks everyone. Thanks especially to Bryan, to Jay, to Joey. Awesome idea. Fun to execute. Good to work together. Hopefully we'll get some more of those done in the future. Let us know what you thought. This is a very comment and response worthy exercise we did. So point out the worst picks, the best picks, who should have gone where, who was undrafted that shouldn't have been, all that stuff. You can do that by joining our Discord, by making sure you're subscribed wherever you can get your podcasts. Check us out on YouTube, 5K subscribers, level cleared. Big excitement. I know you've mentioned this, but throwing that out there too. Tell your friends, tell your enemies, spread the word. Let us know if you like this idea. If you'd like to see more, if you'd like to see less, always open to input. But yeah, that's going to do it. Fun draft. Thanks everybody. Shout out Frank Ntilikina. Apologies, Jared Allen.